I know that we have a young audience here at TYT Sports, and I don't throw this word around often, but for the NBA audience that we do have, which is a large amount of you, it is an absolute pleasure to have a Hall of Famer and the legendary Jack McCallum on the program today. Hello, Jack. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. Nice to be called legendary.
Well, you certainly deserve it. Your recent book, The Golden Days, Steph's Warriors, the 72 Lakers, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor. Was there something, because you have had such an incredible and, as I said, legendary career in not only just writing, not just basketball, but all of sports, especially with your journalism and your storytelling. Is there something that stood out to you that maybe you didn't know upon your research, upon your interviews that you learned in making this book, The Golden Days?
Well, I guess probably the most surprising thing was, normally, particularly when you get to my age, but even years ago, when you're in this business, you usually end up talking to people who are younger than you. I mean, in many ways, they seem older because they're more famous, obviously. But even when I started at SI at age 30 or 31, I was talking to, Larry Bird was younger than me. Magic Johnson was younger than me. Michael Jordan was a lot younger than me. In dealing with Jerry West, who I knew back in the 80s, it was somebody who was older than me. And it's very interesting how much energy he still had, because all around him were people from his generation talking about, well, if I was playing, we'd stop Steph Curry, or we wouldn't let them fast break like that, or Kevin Durant wouldn't get away with that stuff. Jerry's completely different. Jerry somehow comes across as an old school guy, yet somehow who remains plugged into the game, refusing to yield to that temptation of things were better in my day. We did it better. Here's how I did it. So Jerry's ability to connect with this younger generation, stay involved, was not only very interesting to me, but I'm not a young man anymore, and it was kind of a lesson. I really was, to use a word I don't use very much, inspired by it.
And when you discuss Jerry West, what exactly has kept him so young? Has it been him surrounding himself by the great leadership that the Golden State Warriors have? Like, is there one thing that you could point to that has kept him so in touch with what's going on in the current NBA landscape?
Well, I wasn't even smart enough to think about this in the book, and I just started thinking about it later. I think his sons have a lot to do with it. Jerry had a second marriage. His wife Karen now has been married to a long time, but she was younger than him, and so his last two, he has 5 kids, but the last 2 are Ryan West, who's an assistant general manager with the Lakers, and Johnny West, who's a player development guy with the Golden State Warriors. Both of them involved in basketball, both of them smart kids, but not sort of, indebted to the Jerry West legend. They'll go at him. I think, thinking about it, having 2 sons myself, who were roughly that Johnny and Ryan age, that kind of tends to keep you young a little bit. And to have those 2 people in your family who can kind of go at you a little bit. So what you mentioned about the Golden State Warrior ownership, I think that's part of it. Steve Kerr, Bob Myers. But I think Ryan and Johnny have a lot to do with it also.
Jack, I've seen many times over when you have done a lot of these interviews, not that it's a bad thing, but in the Zach Lowe podcast and a few others, the NBA is just so different because of what social media has done to our lives. Yet it seems like a lot of people always point to this. I don't know if Michael Jordan would be able to survive in the social media era, and I don't know if Larry Bird would be able to survive. But like, if you could, because you have seen, you've seen the NBA for so long. What do you think these players would be like if there was a Twitter, if there was a Facebook, if there was an Instagram, and what have you?
Well, they would have to be, obviously, they'd have to be a little more guarded, but they would have become, as this generation of athletes has become, sophisticated about it. Had Michael, when Jordan came into the league, it was a big deal that the guy was getting $1 million for his Nike deal. So now let's say Michael is 3rd or 4th year in the league, social media comes along. the people around Michael, his agent, David Falk, all the people that kind of took care of Michael's businesses, I would guess that he would have embraced it, as fully and as sophisticated as anyone did, like, say, Kobe Bryant did. Magic Johnson would have found a way to kind of leverage the business aspect of it as he did.
Yes.
Larry Bird would have remained a kind of pleasant Scrooge who would have not kind of bowed to it at all. So they would have all found a way. There would have been some missteps along the way, like some of these guys have made, but they would have done just fine with it. But thinking about it, I was so lucky that it wasn't around, because when I went back to start researching Dream Team and 8-9 years ago, researching the book, social media hadn't existed, and the idea, the untapped material that was out there from these guys from 1992 was incredible. I started thinking, if Charles Barkley had been out on the Ramblers during the Barcelona Olympics in 1992 with this Pied Piper act that he did every single night, can you imagine the internet would have blown up, and there was none of this going on. So I feel very fortunate that the internet hadn't been around when I was covering it, because it really left a vast untapped kind of trove of things you could write about.
You mentioned your book Dream Team, about the 92 Dream Team, that was where they had an average win margin of 44 points per game. Now, granted, I was only 4 years old. Sorry to not date myself, but look,
you just did.
Totally. But here's the thing: anybody can be a historian in any way. Everything is on YouTube. All you have to do is be a student of the game, and I took it in many times over. And my dad showed me this many times over. But just take me back through the scrimmage between Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, the blue team and the white team, and why for the younger audience is this such an iconic scrimmage with Chuck Daly as the head coach and the vast talent that the Dream Team had that year?
Well, what happened, what you're referring to, was the team went to, right before the Barcelona Olympics, the team decided they were going to train in Monte Carlo, like anyone goes to Monte Carlo to get in your basketball reps. But they had played the national team of France the night before, and everybody was kind of, I don't give a shit performance, and they were certainly a little bit hungover, and they let the French team hang around for a while. And Chuck Daly, the coach, there was this, it seems hard to believe now, but there was this much chance people thought that they would get upset in Barcelona. Mm-hmm. And this would be a story of just, magnitude beyond belief. So Chuck decided he was going to scrimmage them hard that day, and we couldn't watch practice. They kind of followed Olympic rules, which was the press and the players were really kept far apart, which was not what we were used to. Access was pretty good back then. We watched practice. Chuck was great. Magic was a welcoming figure to the press. Michael was in many ways. But when you got involved in Olympic rules, it was different. There was this great separation. So we got to practice that day, and obviously something had happened. Magic was pissed off. Michael was walking around singing the, Gatorade song or Be Like Mike right. song. And it evolved that there had been this scrimmage, which we did not get to watch. And some people alluded to it, and Magic didn't want to talk about it, but Michael did. So over the years, it kind of grew into this sort of mythic beast that this scrimmage had existed, but it wasn't filmed and no one saw it. And there was great trash talking. And well, when I started researching the book, it didn't, I knew everything was filmed, because Chuck had a cameraman there. And I found the Detroit Pistons videographer. And I said, you must have filmed this scrimmage. You must have. And I went up to his house in Detroit, and he had a stack of, VCR tapes that big on his living room floor. So we had a couple beers and went through it. And suddenly I said, there it is. That's the scrimmage that we supposedly never saw. So he gave me, I got a copy of it, and I got it sound enhanced.
Wow.
And I enhanced it the way that I could, because the whole thing was going to be this kind of trash talking choir that was going on between, primarily Magic and Michael. Karl Malone got into it a little bit. Larry got into it a little bit. So it constituted one chapter of the book. The level of play in the game wasn't maybe what you would expect, but it was this idea of the 10 best players in the world going at each other in a deserted gym with nothing on the line except pride, and how much this really meant to them for one team to dominate the other. And the game kind of followed a script. I mean, Michael got behind. Michael and Pippen were on one team. They got behind and came back, and through Jordan heroics won the game. So it was a great microcosm of what was going on in the NBA back then. And I really felt fortunate to have gotten a hold of this tape. Since then, hundreds of people have said, why don't you release this tape? And geez, everybody should see this. And I agree. But right after I wrote that I had possession of this tape, the NBA kind of swooped in and took ownership of it. And so it's sitting it's in my office right over there in a bag, but very few people have ever seen it. I wanted the videographer to get the money for it. I wanted him to be able to kind of package it and do what he wants with it. But it's the NBA property, and maybe I'll revisit the subject somewhere down the road with them.
Right, but it also seems like you have this camaraderie with the Detroit videographer as well for this not to be released, which obviously, from a journalistic perspective, I truly appreciate as well.
Well, I wanted him. I never did think it was mine. I mean, I thought it should be. It was Pete Skorich is his name, and I thought it should be Pete's. But we'll see what happens. It's 25 years old now, so something should happen.
Right. When's the copyright just going to expire on this damn thing already? Yeah, completely. Exactly. Can you take me through why it took so long for NBA players to just be competing in the Olympics?
Well, there was this long tradition of this was the college kid. Well, first of all, there was this great shamateurism idea, sham amateurism, that we only sent our amateurs and everybody else was, no matter what, even if they were sending their professionals, we could still compete with them. In basketball, this really held forth because we had been so successful. There had been 1972, there was the stumble in Munich with the great, game restarted 3 different times before the Soviets finally won. So there was that, but then we won in 76 and, great Quinn Buckner team. 80, there was the boycott. 1984 was the great Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing team, the one that Barkley had gotten cut from. They won the gold medal easily. So there was never a push in the United States for our pro players to play. And along concomitantly, there was a pushing against the pro players playing by the rest of the world. So, these two forces kind of combined to never really make it an issue. Then we lose in 88 at around the same time that Boris Stankovic, who was this, unbelievably interesting Yugoslavian character, he was the president of FIBA, and Boris Stankovic sort of came to the conclusion that the game could never truly grow unless NBA players were presented on the Olympic stage. And had he done this, let's say 1985, 86, and the United States had really wanted to get behind it, maybe it would have happened by 88, but it was just kind of this combined forces of the United States not pushing it, the rest of the world not wanting it. And even when the vote came in 1989, the United States voted against it, against letting pros play. that was kind of a wink and a nod because they knew by then that Stankovic had twisted enough arms that it was going to happen. But, there was, you're too young, obviously, by the math you just gave, but boy, you can't believe the resistance there was to this. Why the hell does Michael Jordan, who's got by now a $2 million Nike deal, why does he need to go and steal the thunder from the Olympic? It seems natural now, but it was sort of against the whole flow of nature back when this really started to become a thing.
As I did tell you, Jack, I'm from Chicago. I grew up on Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, Steve Kerr, B.J. Armstrong, Dennis Rodman, all those teams. Sam Smith, who is a also huge writer in the Chicagoland area, who put out the Jordan rules. We all know how the game sort of evolved as Michael Jordan also evolved as a player. But was there one moment where you witnessed, because we saw Gary Payton, I know I'm going in different directions here, but we saw Gary Payton this past week put out something in the Players Tribune about this incredible shit talking that Michael Jordan gave to him. And granted, it seems like Gary Payton could never be humbled on the court. He was humbled right then and there because Payton was talking smack to them in preseason, and then later on during the regular season, he said, "Yeah, welcome to the NBA, Rook," and he put up a ton of points on Gary Payton and company. Was there one moment where you saw Michael Jordan just completely take somebody out of their game because of the endless, like miles amount of smack talking that he gave to that player?
I think I can't remember really one moment, but one of the things I remember about Jordan that really stuck with me, and that was this guy's level of fame, his ability to kind of control it, and then go out on the court and dominate. And there was a game in Chicago when I went into the locker room, and Michael was very accommodating. It's a whole story about what happened to Michael and the press later on. But I mean, early in his career, Michael was a very accommodating guy. And I'd be in the locker room beforehand, not just me, but a bunch of reporters. And I remember one night Michael was, on this side of him was the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was lobbying with Michael about trying to get him to do something. On this side of him was Kid and Play, who was a great, I guess Kid and Play was a rapper, right? I mean, he had the, great hair up this high and everything like that. It was a big star back then. So Michael is talking to all these guys. He goes out on the tunnel. They were playing the Cavaliers that night. This was after the Craig Elo game, when he had tortured them, and he was still going through all this stuff he couldn't get by the Pistons. And he walks out of the tunnel, and Jesse Jackson's on one side, and Kid and Play is on another side. And the other team, who happened to be the Cavaliers, came out at the same time. And I just remember them kind of all looking at Jordan like, that it's sort of like we're escorting the king to the court. And then he goes out on the court, kind of forgets about them for the next 48 minutes and lays 49 points. I still remember that. No, I think that was the number. 12 rebounds, 9 assists on the Cavaliers. And that game, which wasn't anything particular, just kind of stuck with me because that was Michael Jordan's life, that he was in just this total control of everything. And but it only happened after he got by the Pistons. Mm-hmm. That was in the 1991 season. And finally, when Jordan seized the control, finally when it became obvious they beat the Pistons to get to the finals, they controlled the Lakers by winning 4 straight. It became obvious that as long as he was playing, until he decided he had to come out in the court in a walker, that Michael Jordan was going to dominate. There was no other script, that could be written. He had a great, in his words, supporting cast. Obviously Pippen was perfect for that. He always had a shooter. He always had a rebounder. He had Phil Jackson. But it was this idea that it was my world, it's Jordan's world. you're just living in it. And as long as I'm in the driver's seat, this is kind of how it's going to be. And, even for somebody like LeBron, it's never exactly been like that. It's never exactly been like that. I'm not sure we'll see it again.
Hey, Jack, quick question for you. I told Rick off air, I had a sports psych class in college, and we actually studied you and your book, Dream Team, based on how you... I'm sorry?
I hope you had more academic books than that in this class.
There was more, but our professor was just a really big fan of the game and a really big fan of the writing, and he made me a fan of your writing. And so, years later, this was back in 2012, and he really emphasized on how you made players feel, and we really got a chance to make ourselves feel like we were at the game during the Dream Team era when you were covering those games, especially when you recapped it in the book. What was it like, or what did you want people to feel when you wrote about these players and when you really released the book?
Well, if I got any, it's interesting. I'm glad you actually asked that, because I've always wanted a chance to explain this. If I did get some, I can't have any complaints about the book. The book was, very successful. People loved it. It was great. I can't say anything bad about the Dream Team. But if I did get some criticism, it was, hey man, why'd you put yourself in the book? Why Jack was just sucking up to these players. And if you see other stuff that some of the stuff I did, like this recent book, I don't particularly like to put myself in this, in the story.
Right.
But
you're a big part of the story.
Well, here's what happened. I wrote the introduction. I wrote this introduction, and I said to my editor, I don't know whether I want to put myself in the book. And he said to me, you were on a journey. You got to take this. You got to take people on this journey. And it suddenly, it dawned on me, it kind of opened up that that's sort of what it was, that I kind of had to describe what it was to people to kind of be along on the, almost famous thing to reiterate the movie, which I just saw again last night, by the way, Cameron Crowe writing about rock stars and how you're just sort of on the back seat of the bus. And the fact that this was being written about something that happened 20 years earlier and was hopefully going to, engage younger readers like the two of you guys, it had to come across as sort of a journey. This was what it was like.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my idea, in sort of doing it that way, even though I grimaced once in a while when people would say, oh, he was just trying to suck up to them. And trust me, if there's one rule for anybody out there who wants to write a book, you do not write the book to please the people you're writing about. They may not even read it. You shouldn't even really give a crap whether they read it or not. You hope they think it was fair, but you shouldn't give a crap whether they like it or whether they find some part of it testable. You have to write it for the people that are reading it.
Absolutely.
That's my lesson for today anyway.
Absolutely. No, that's a life lesson. I was actually going to ask you what's a takeaway that you got during the writing of this book, and that's perfect. And I think you can apply that to anything. When a player goes on the court to play, he's not necessarily playing for what his critics are telling him what he should or shouldn't do. He's playing, for his stats or for his game. So you hit that right on the dot for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Jack, I'm curious, in Zach Lowe's podcast, you called Stephen Curry a revolutionary player. What exactly do you mean by that? And do you think that we're seeing one right now in the current NBA landscape?
Well, players that come along, there's not that many players that teams change the game. I mean, the Detroit Pistons, once again, before your time, changed it by playing kind of a bad boy defense, and that was in vogue for a while. Riley took that to New York, and the game got slowed down, and Scores were in the 90s, sometimes in the 80s. I mean, one of my favorite stats about the NBA was the 99-2000 season. The Sacramento Kings were the only team to average 100 points.
Wow.
So teams kind of changed the game. Then Mike D'Antoni came along with the Phoenix Suns and kind of changed it a little bit. We started fast breaking. But really, to get a player to change something is really, really very unusual. And I think what happened with Steph, and I didn't really realize it until I started researching the book, was that how much that just the way he played changed the game. And that was his ability to shoot accurately, not only from 3-point distance, from what we might call 4-point distance, was you had to start guarding the Warriors as soon as they came over half court just about. I mean, not to mention Steph, but there was also Klay Thompson. So now the whole geometry of the game has changed. Your defense is pushed out by the half court line. They're setting screen rolls way out by midcourt. So every game becomes every possession becomes almost like a transition. I'm starting to sound like UB Brown here, but not really. I don't know.
No, you can't. That's not true. That's not true.
I don't know nearly as
well,
much.
Mike, what they're trying to do in the 2-3 zone is what they're trying to set the pick at the elbow. Like, great on radio.
I, by the way, interviewed UB for this book. We were in San Antonio. I'm in a hotel, and UB, like, who's 12 or 13 years older than I am, like, springs out of his seat, and he's setting chairs around the Westin Hotel in San Antonio, trying to tell me how Golden State has brought backpicking back into the game.
Of course.
Anyway,
always a coach.
Yeah, this is Steph. I mean, this is what he was able to do. I mean, he really, really opened up the game, and he needed Klay Thompson to do it a little bit. He needed Steve Kerr to say, "This is okay. This is how we're going to play." But I really think of Steph being really revolutionary in that aspect of the game, opening it up and making the game kind of so wide open, even when you're in half-court situations.
Absolutely. So it's clearly that Steph's Warriors, and you mentioned your book earlier, Golden Days, your latest book, Golden Days. There's a piece on there that I read that goes over you talking about Jerry West, right, and West's Lakers. And I believe you mentioned watching a game with Jerry West. Am I right?
Yeah, I knew to. Jerry was legendarily a legendary incendiary critic of his own teams. And this is going back to the 80s when I covered the Lakers, when Jerry was the GM of the Lakers. We would see him up there seething while his team was, throwing the ball away. Sometimes he would leave the game. I mean, he got so pissed off. He was like the scene in Moneyball when Billy Beane, Brad Pitt, can't bear to watch his own team.
Right.
And Jerry was like that. But as far as I knew, nobody had ever watched a game with him to see how bad this was. And I decided that I really had to watch a game with him to really, get this book done. I thought it was going to be, well, I want to watch him alone, and I don't know whether I want to open that up to anybody. But I called him up, and he was not going on the road with the team for Game 4 against the Cavaliers. And he goes, "Yeah, come over." So I sat there, just laid the tape recorder on the couch while Jerry, took off on his team during the game. And it happened to be the one game that the Warriors were really, really, really bad against the Cavaliers, Game 4 of the finals, which was the only playoff game that they lost. So it was a good one to see from that aspect.
Jack, you've covered so many different athletes in this sport and so many iconic athletes as well. Is there one that stands out that you associate with just a story that your mind automatically defaults to as like a microcosm of that great player?
Yeah, I guess it would be, this was before the Dream Team, and I was doing a story on the Celtics, and the Celtics were playing a game against the Indiana Pacers, and this was back in more the not going to say the primitive days of the NBA, and they were having a shoot around that day against Indiana, and the morning of the game, and the gym wasn't ready for some reason, and the Celtics were locked out of the gym, and they were, everybody was pissed off. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. What are we doing here? And I could still see Larry Bird like leaning against the wall, kind of. And Dennis Johnson says to him, we're just going to have to dust these motherfuckers worse than we were. And Bird just looks down at him and goes, yeah, that's what we're going to have to do. And they got over there, and they just kind of owned the game. And I think it was this sort of a number of, not every player had it. We talked about Michael having it, talked about Magic Johnson certainly had it, and Larry Bird had it. Barkley had it. Not everybody did, but this utter command of everything, that when we're at the top of our game, we can kind of do anything. And that kind of spirit sort of epitomized, a number of guys on that dream team. You can call it arrogance or whatever, but somehow they were able to pull it off. And I see today's people criticizing, maybe LeBron once in a while for being arrogant. I'm going, man, that guy didn't have anything on Jordan or Bird in terms of being just an arrogant guy that we're going to be, able to do anything we want. And it's that kind of attitude that kind of sticks with me.
That makes sense. And then we kind of go before asking, you were a legendary sports journalist. You covered amazing stories. You were there during the Dream Team era, and covered many more games after that, and many more players. And you have amazing books, which we've mentioned. Is there any sports journalist or any media elites or anybody in the journalism field in sports that reminds you of yourself, or that you're watching because you just genuinely respect their opinion?
Well, today's people are so different. There's so many people I respect, and my path to what I did in journalism, I'm a complete dinosaur. I started out at a small newspaper and got to Sports Illustrated because I sent them some clippings, and they liked them. And then I wrote some freelance stories, and I got to SI on the basis of that. That path doesn't exist anymore. And somewhere there comes a point in your career, for me it was at the Olympics in 2000, when you had to decide, was your best stuff going to go on the website, or were you going to save it for the magazine? This became a really kind of crucial point for a lot of us who were older journalists, who were used to saving up the material and taking 4 or 5 days to write it. And you didn't have to write it right away, so you could make it better. You could ask some questions that other journalists didn't have time for. I'm winding around to your question in a long way. So no, there was this point when you had to decide if you were going to join, the new forces, or just continue the way you always did it. And Sports Illustrated did not do a good enough job of joining the new way. The website got off. I think it's a great website now, but it got off to kind of, a slower start. And all of a sudden you woke up someday and there were people telling stories in a different way than you told them. Bill Simmons certainly changed the landscape for sports journalism. There was a guy from Sports Illustrated named Curry Kirkpatrick who used to write like Bill years ago. But it didn't have the same impact. Bill found a way to do it across many mediums. You mentioned Zach Lowe. Zach's ability to both plug in, kind of sabermetrically and also tell the story is something I really admire. Chris Mannix kind of does the same thing. the Woj does the same thing. So out in when I was researching the book, the Warriors part of the book, those guys out there, Marcus Thompson, Tim Kawakami, Anthony Slater, they do such a good job with podcasts.
Yeah.
That in fact, I'm even trying to think about doing one next week and what we're doing right now. There's so many different ways to tell a story. And I came up when there was only one way. You told it with this long kind of magazine way. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do it in books also. But I really admire the people that are finding new ways to tell stories.
Right. And real quick, I think what, at least for me on a personal level, what I really admired about your writing was you never really detoured people from thinking a certain way, or you never forced them to think about ideas that you wanted them to think about. You kind of planted a new vision from a new angle, and we were able to really see things from a completely different perspective as opposed to forced media. There's a lot of forced media these days, and you're forced to really think about one thing, and you really did a great job at kind of clearing people's minds, getting in there, planning a new idea, and letting it evolve naturally.
Well, I came up in an era when, for me, everything, the tightrope that I worked, not just me, but people from my era, the tightrope that we walked was access. The more access you got, the better your story was, the deeper it was. But the more access you get, the closer you get to an athlete, and we're kind of like human beings. If somebody lets you in and likes you,
right,
your writing would tend to kind of go that way. And I was fortunate, and I think walked that tightrope pretty well between people letting me in and liking me okay, but still kind of telling the truth. But B, being fortunate enough to come along in an era when athletes understood not everything was going to be positive.
Right.
Magic Johnson, Larry Bird came into a league that was dying. And part of their covenant with the league was that they were going to help to sell it. And part of the thing that part of that was they had to talk to schlubs like me. And that kind of became the paradigm. Even Michael paid attention to it. Guys, now it's a little bit different. They're very sophisticated about their own media. We talked about it a couple minutes ago. They have their own platforms. They have Players Tribune. They have their own websites. They have their own Twitter feeds. They have a way of breaking their own stories. So when you get, and we're really fortunate now because I think guys like Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, who are very, very sophisticated about their own platforms, also understand that you need to extend at least a pinky finger, to people like me in the media. And I think right now the NBA has always been a great league, has always been a media-friendly league more than anything else. I don't think people understand the degree to which that is true. And I was very fortunate to have been covering that sport because I tell you, it wouldn't have been as easy in other sports. It's just not the same thing.
Jack, I got two more for you. I've heard through a few different interviews that you've given that although Draymond Green is such an important player, an integral player for the Golden State Warriors, you have called him many times a knucklehead, which has been warranted. It's been completely warranted. Now, using that term knucklehead, who would be your starting five all knucklehead team? Now, this could be current, this could be past, what have you. It doesn't matter. Who would be your starting five knucklehead team?
Well, knucklehead, you have to understand, I use somewhat affectionately. I think it was sort of a Chuck Daly word. He's got a knuckle, kind of a grudging respect that he's a knucklehead. He's not a bad guy.
Right.
It was more like, knucklehead rather than bad guy. Charles is on the knucklehead team. I mean, Charles Barkley has to be on the knucklehead team. Rodman has to be on the knucklehead team. It's kind of hard to find a center for for your knucklehead team, but I'm going to go a little bit with Shaq. Shaq could certainly be a knucklehead. Probably didn't maximize. He never played an 82-game season. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Right.
Shaq would always find a way to miss a couple games.
Could you put Dwight Howard on that list as well?
Yeah.
Not that they have to all be great. I'm just saying, like, in terms of, it's so subjective, but in terms of knucklehead for me, I feel like Dwight Howard is like the creme de la creme of knucklehead in the NBA.
I could agree with that.
Yeah, that's probably true, but you know what? That kind of gets to, I guess, how I'm using the term. You're right. But I guess the way I use the term is I almost look at knuckleheads like affectionately. Almost when I use, and it's hard for me, frankly, to look at Dwight all that affectionately. I think that I agree. Wasted, probably wasted more of his potential, than almost any player that I dealt with during my era. Going back, there's got to be, there was a great knucklehead guy that I wrote about a little bit in Golden Days, and that was a guy named Flynn Robinson, who used to come off the Lakers bench and do nothing but shoot. Flynn just played absolutely zero defense. He's liable to say anything off the court. He was kind of an unbridled type of guy. Flynn would be a good knucklehead guy. I guess I got four there. Yeah, and we'll include Dwight, and we'll have Draymond. So we got Draymond, we got Charles, we got Dennis Rodman, we got Dwight, we got Flynn Robinson to shoot. I'll tell you what we got. We got a lot of rebounders.
Yeah, we do, certainly.
They all, Barkley, Rodman, Dwight, Draymond, they all go after the ball. Maybe there's something to that.
Jack, last question for you. So we are, we're both in our 20s. A lot of people that are watching this are going to be, the YouTube audience is millennial based. 12.
And they're all going to be saying, "Why are you interviewing this guy?"
Absolutely not.
Are you kidding me?
And if they say that, they're not welcome to be a part of our audience because they should damn well know who Jack McCallum is.
I'm pretty sure they've read your books, Jack. I'm pretty sure.
I hope. So I guess my question is for the millennial-based audience that we have, like the 12 to 35, I would say, a lot of them want to get into media. As you have seen it, and you've called yourself a dinosaur, granted it was in hilarious fashion, what would be your piece of advice as you've seen media completely evolve from going from heavy newspapers? You said that you sent clippings. Denise and I looked at each other like, oh, that's kind of funny how time has evolved. But like, yeah, clippings.
Like a recipe that's written down on a...
Right, yeah. It's in Chrissy Teigen's cookbook, actually. But like, seriously, like what would be your advice for a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old entering college or in college right now that wants to make it as a journalist, specifically in sports?
Very specifically, it would be this. There are, Stephen A. has made it. Skip Bayless has made it at a certain platform, but those couple exceptions notwithstanding, here would be the first thing I would tell them. Try to understand that you're not that interesting. What you want to do is find people that are interesting. You might be interesting. I'm being a little bit, a little bit callous here, but try to find a way to tell a story that isn't about you telling a story. I know that's how I told the Dream Team book. I know that's how I did it.
I was about to say that too, Jack.
When you're first getting into the business, try to find a way to tell a story about people that doesn't involve you, that maybe it's not what you think about this person. Listen to people talking. Listen to how to tell a story. If you can tell a story, if you can figure out how to tell someone's story, what quotes to use, who to go to fill out the remainder of that story, and not to always, look at yourself in terms of how to tell it. I think you can really go places in the business. You can find a way. There's a lot of avenues now that weren't around when I was there. Everybody talks about writing, being irrelevant, but I don't know. I've had success with books. Long form writing is still working on some platforms. Certainly, you have to be more adept and adroit at video than I was, but it's still about storytelling. So forget about yourself when you first get into this business. Find interesting stories. Be interested in other people, because there's always a story. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to have a job for 50 years if people didn't want to talk about themselves. And there's interesting stories all over the place. You find them, you figure out how to tell them, there'll be a place for you in the business.
Alrighty, so it sounds like selflessness is certainly the key from the great Jack McCallum. Jack, look, we really appreciate you joining us. I know that, quick story, I reached out very randomly, and Jack was so kind to not only answer back, gave me his cell phone number, and was so open to joining us. So look, we really appreciate your insights. We appreciate the conversation, and I hope that you will join us again in the very near future.
Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun.
All right, Jack. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All righty, Jack McCallum, holy smokes, that was awesome. All right, let's step aside for a second. We'll be back. Denise Jones is here, I'm here, and Paul George is as well. Now, it's not like it's a secret anymore. We know that he wants to join the Los Angeles Lakers, but he was candid and he finally spoke about it. So I think it's newsworthy to show that. So here's Paul George speaking on what occurred in the offseason with not only the Pacers, but also how he pretty much wanted to join the Los Angeles Lakers. Take a look.
Well, you said you wanted, when you decided you weren't going to stay in Indiana, you wanted them to be able to trade you and get something out of it. Do you have any regrets that the Lakers part of that came out, that became public?
No, no regrets at all. All was said was a destination that I would love to go to. There wasn't, hey, gunpoint to the head, send me here. I just stated somewhere I wanted to go play. You ask 80, 70% of guys in the league if they would love to go back home and play in front of for their city, play for their home. That's all I stated. I would have loved to go back home and play for my city. So no regrets at all. No regrets at all. I thought this trade that went down was a win-win for both sides. And I'm happy we both move on.
I just looked up because I was curious. He went to Palmdale High School. Do you know where that is?
Yeah, I know exactly where that's at. That's not.
It's not LA.
It's not LA, but
he's still a Laker fan.
He's still a Laker fan, and you know what? He played for the YMCA Junior Lakers team, and he put up a picture. I remember a couple of years ago, he put up a picture of his 10-year-old self, and he's like,
can you imagine Paul George with the Village people like?
He's wearing this really adorable YMCA junior Laker jersey. He's a kid who's a Laker fan. Now, yes, he's from Palmdale. Frankly, there's nothing in Palmdale. So the fact that he's a Lakers fan, that's fine. We'll accept him being a Laker fan. He's whether he be a Laker or a Clippers fan, I feel like if you're from Palmdale, if you're from the IE, if you're from Lancaster,
the IE?
The Inland Empire,
Gotcha.
Riverside, different areas that are not LA, you're either gonna go for the Lakers or you're gonna go for the Clippers. It just makes sense. It's a two California team, or I mean, Southern California.
It doesn't,
not assuming the Kings.
Right, but like it doesn't even matter if you're like from a different area, really. Because like, as you know, as a Laker fan, as many people know, just coexisting with Lakers fans, no matter where they are. You could be in IE, as the kids say, or you could be in like freaking Milwaukee. Like there's going to be Lakers fans everywhere.
Yeah,
so I guess it doesn't matter. So here's the second part, and I just want to revisit this, where the Lakers tampered was not only with them making contact that they shouldn't have because Paul George was under contract at that time with the Indiana Pacers, but also Magic Johnson went on Jimmy Kimmel and said this. So take a look at that.
Like if you're on vacation and you run into Paul George, are you not allowed to speak to him?
No, we're gonna say hi because we know each other.
I see.
You just can't say, hey, I want you to come to the Lakers, even though I'm gonna be winking like, you know what that means,
right? Bart's like, come on, bro. But like, I get it. But here's the thing, we all know. Everybody knows. I understand that this is like NBA protocol, but you're trying to tell me, all right, I'm looking at you, Bart, since you were like, fuck. Like, you're trying to tell me that when Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and LeBron James were playing for Team USA, they weren't like, yeah, we should play together? Like, come on, everybody does it. It's a little different when an executive does it. However, it's still Magic freaking Johnson who has relationships with every NBA player in almost every single NBA city, because not only was he iconic, but also players in the current landscape want to be friends with him. So I guess my point is, it's not a big deal. The Lakers got fined $600,000. They can make that back in probably like one game against the Golden State Warriors through concessions. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What I truly appreciate is Paul George's honesty, that he finally, it seems, went on the record. If I'm forgetting another time, I apologize. But he came clean and said, like, it's just something I wanted to do. I wanted to play for my hometown team.
And there's nothing wrong with somebody playing for their hometown team. I get it. There's nothing absolutely wrong. Maybe he's tired of the weather that he's getting in OKC, and he's like, you know.
Is it warm?
I don't know. I've never been to Oklahoma.
I've never. Nope, I haven't been here.
So I mean, I wouldn't know. Maybe he just misses the warm weather, the beaches, the fact that you can go to the beaches and mountains and the desert on the same day. But I wanted to ask you this when you were mentioning this point.
Yeah.
Is there, because Magic, he vouches for a few players, right? Every now and then he vouches for a few.
Well,
players.
he was in the media. Remember that as well.
No, I know he was.
Yeah, he's going to vouch for almost everybody.
He doesn't vouch for everybody. He vouches for a few players.
All right. He doesn't vouch for Jimmy Buss.
He doesn't vouch for Jimmy.
He doesn't vouch for that guy.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Is there any player? Because I feel like he has great basketball knowledge. He has a great basketball IQ. Is there any player that he's been wrong about vouching for? Let us know in the comments below.
That's a great point. Nice. All right, 3, 2. The SpongeBob uniforms are apparently a thing, and it's going on with the Philadelphia 76ers D-League affiliate. It's not a big thing?
It's not a bad thing.
Oh no, well, you be the judge. Take a look. All right, now just do me a favor. You see it? Let's go to the next slide. Now go back, and the next slide, and then back. The only thing I don't like, all right,
is the holes?
Is the tie is basically the player's dick.
What the? Okay, hold on. See, that's such a guy.
Look at the shorts.
That's such a guy thing.
Well, men are from Mars and women are from.
That's such a guy thing to notice. I mean, it's now hindsight.
So you're a fan of that?
Not of the tie.
No,
now.
I'm saying the entire jersey.
Explain why it's there. It's there for Nickelodeon night.
Right.
And the kids are there. They're excited.
Oh, well, yeah. I thought you were going with the tie.
No, I'm not going to mention the tie. Am I a fan of the tie or not?
No, I'm not.
I don't care 2 cents about the tie. But the uniform itself, I thought it's creative. It's creative, it's festive, the kids are gonna love it, and they're more than anything doing it for the kids. So.
Yes, they're doing it for the kids, they're doing it for charity, everything's gonna be auctioned off. So, and here's what they put on Twitter. All player uniforms will be autographed and auctioned off to fans post-game. All proceeds to be donated to Child Inc., courtesy of the Raybold Group. So this is not the first time that the 87ers have done something. I'm sorry, I decided to grab the most random pictures of SpongeBob via Getty Images because that's where we have rights to. So I just wanted to show.
How did it come down to SpongeBob is my question.
I don't know.
There's so many great Nick shows that.
Great Nickelodeon shows. Great shows.
I mean, I'm not saying, again, I'm a fan of the Nickelodeon uniforms. I'm a fan that they're doing it for the kids. Every kid, well, I don't know what the kids are watching now, but around our age,
SpongeBob like done?
But name a more iconic intergenerational like first sight.
Then like, Nickelodeon?
Then
SpongeBob. That's a good point.
Like he's so recognizable to just like first glance.
Where's Rugrats from?
That's Nickelodeon.
That's Nickelodeon, but not as revolutionary.
How are you gonna put a diaper on a uniform?
Okay, what comes after SpongeBob? Like what?
I'll put a diaper on.
I'm gonna say Ren and Stimpy, like a little bit before.
Yeah,
Ren
but what
and
does that
Stimpy.
uniform look like? Like you got to think about how you like actually logistically put this on a uniform.
This is a great question.
It wouldn't. I know. I don't know what it would look like, but it would be dirty and smelly.
I personally think Rugrats would be a great uniform to see. What's another one? I think Fairly Odd Parents, is that Nickelodeon too?
All right, here's just a quick Google search.
Okay.
You tell me if you could put this on a uniform.
I'm not even gonna look at it. I'll tell you.
Rugrats.
Yes, I said Rugrats. I think that would be great. Fans?
Homies?
Fans?
All I want is a yes or no.
I guess yeah, because I support
he's
the Rugrats.
going with a no.
But like, how do you?
What about you, Bart?
Yes.
I like how they made it look like it was SpongeBob. Like SpongeBob is the uniform. You can't put like Chucky on a like, you know what I mean?
Chucky, actually, you can.
Chucky, you can because the blue and the green.
But Tommy, you can't.
But it's not as iconic as a SpongeBob.
True. But what's next?
Right?
What's next?
Ren and Stimpy.
Oh, you said that, right? Did you say that, Bart?
Yeah, I think you can with Ren and Stimpy.
Hey Arnold.
Hey Arnold, you can definitely put it on a.
It'd be funny to see how they do Arnold's face on a uniform.
Yeah, they'd probably just do hair and hat.
For sure.
You think so?
Yeah, you could definitely, because he has the whole thing is like the clothing. You have to have like iconic clothing, and
he has iconic clothing.
Definitely does.
His hat is more iconic than anything he's wearing, but
I think the plaid is more iconic than anything.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Good point. Good point.
Well, hang on a second. It's a different argument now if you could put it on a uniform. Your initial point was spot on. That we set the bar so high because SpongeBob is so revolutionary for Rugrats, for Nickelodeon, that now it's like, well, Rugrats wasn't as iconic, and Ren and Stimpy
Rugrats was very iconic.
It was,
and Hey Arnold was as well.
Look, I was a huge Rugrats fan, all right, but I could call a spade a spade. SpongeBob has a larger impact than Rugrats ever had.
Absolutely.
Here's just a few more, and then we're gonna get out of here. Doug.
I love
Doug.
What?
What was the name of the band? You remember?
The Beats.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Rocco's Modern Life, nah. iCarly.
You could do Rocco's Modern Life. They always had like the funky '80s print.
Cat Dog.
Cat Dog could be in there.
Absolutely.
All that. No, that was like
all
SNL
that was a
for
great
kids.
show, though. All that was a great show.
Keenan and Kel.
SNL for kids.
Great show.
Much,
great show.
And Keenan and Kel.
Great show.
All right, I got two more.
Give us an animated.
What about Real Monsters?
Which one?
Not iconic.
No,
not
iconic.
Cartoons, guys.
I thought, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
No, that's the wrong answer.
What's the other three? Give us three more animated shows.
Well,
if any.
Carissa Explains It All.
No.
The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron.
Yeah.
It was made into a movie.
Neutron. Boy genius.
Angry Beavers.
Yeah.
And
safe to say, Rugrats and Hey Arnold would be a close second.
Real
runner-ups.
Yeah.
For uniforms.
Okay, real quick. This is not the first time the 87ers did this. They had Power Ranger uniforms.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe Nate Robinson was rocking one of those. Thank you. And
that was sick.
That was pretty cool. And then the other one, I'm blanking on it. Oh, the Star Wars uniforms. And they were both auctioned off for charity. I'm a fan of the Star Wars.
I'm a fan of Power Rangers.
I'm a fan of the Power Rangers. I don't know about the SpongeBob, but I appreciate them trying. Because look, any minor league affiliate, if anybody studies this ever, they try to do the wackiest, most crazy shit in order to not only get an audience in the stadium, but also then make an impact and sell it for charity.
Absolutely.
So there you go. Alrighty, thoughts, comments section, subscribe to TYT Sports.